Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ashley Gallegos with Interdyne BMI, and today we have a special presentation for you on Power BI and Dynamics NAV, a match made in heaven. We started the call by muting everyone, so if you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the question box feature located on the dashboard on the right-hand side of your screen. We will have some time for Q&A with your presenter at the end, where we will be going over all the questions that have been submitted. Also, we will be recording this session and uploading it to YouTube if you ever want to go back and reference anything that you've learned today. And now, I'm excited to introduce your presenter today, AJ Ansari. AJ is Interdyne BMI's NAV product manager and expert with over 10 years of experience with Dynamics NAV. Located in Houston, Texas as our NAV technical lead, he is a Dynamics credentialed professional and was recently awarded NAVUG All-Star at the 2016 User Group Summit. Today, he will be sharing how Power BI tackles your reporting dreams with Dynamics NAV. So without further ado, AJ, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm excited to have everyone on the call today. This conversation is going to show quite a bit about Power BI, about as much as we can squeeze into an hour, but it'll also have a bit of a focus on Dynamics NAV. If you're not a Dynamics NAV user, you'll still derive some benefit from attending this session. But if you are using NAV or perhaps even Dynamics 365 for financials, you will walk away with the ability to accomplish some good, simple reporting tasks that I think your organization will benefit from. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit about Power BI. I think I just had a couple of slides for anybody who's not familiar with it or is really joining on this particular topic or this thread of webinars for the first time. We have done some preliminary webinars earlier in the year around Power BI basics, just explaining what it is and its its presence in the Microsoft stack. What Microsoft's been focused on over the last few years is increasing availability of what they call the Power Suite in business productivity applications. So whether it's using it for standard Office 365 tools and products like Excel, Excel-based spreadsheets, comma-separated files, and so on, or through business applications like Dynamics NAV, Dynamics GP, Dynamics 365, etc., you are going to be able to enhance the value derived from those using a combination of additional tools. Now, when we say Power Suite, there's Microsoft Power BI, which is the topic of our conversation today, as well as things like Power Apps, Flow, AppSource, the actual place where you can download a lot of the third-party applications, and Cortana Intelligence Suite, which is an excellent tool for predictive analysis and forecasting. So Power BI is probably by far the most mature of the products available in that particular Power Suite, and it represents an excellent area for us to create new reports that can be used by different people in your organization, from C-level executives to business unit managers to your rank and file employees. Everybody can see something that is specific to the work that they do and derive an immense amount of benefit without always logging into Dynamics NAV or seeing information just from Dynamics NAV. So really, what is Power BI? It's a great tool for KPIs and visualization of your data, your company's data, in a manner that can be accessed from a phone device or tablet or from that powerbi.com website. So I'll keep that introduction to Power BI just to this extent. If you are interested in learning more and you didn't attend the initial webinars, reach out to us. You'll see my email address and our marketing team's email address at the end of this presentation, and we can send you recorded videos from our earlier presentations. So our session today is really designed to give you a little bit of instruction and knowledge on how to create custom data sets for Power BI. And when I talk about data sets, I mean a combination of queries and information from Dynamics NAV that you will turn around into reports, into dashboards that you can then share with other people in your organization. Power BI comes with a good number of visualizations built in, everything from some charts and some graphs, etc. And then on top of that, you're going to find true custom visuals developed by a group of third-party companies. So whether we're talking about Microsoft or third-party specialists in the business intelligence domain, I think that it's a robust market out there with a lot of different visualizations that you can download and benefit from at your organization. And then finally, we want to give you some takeaways, things that you can immediately derive benefit from. We do that by showing you how you can, understand the nuances of reports created from the financial domain, as well as what happens when you're trying to work with business data from other areas. So both of those are going to be some pretty critical aspects over here, so we'll touch on that too. Now, this type of conversation can easily span multiple hours. Just last week, I was the user group, the Dynamics NAV user group, and the Microsoft Power BI user group focus conference, and I had a similar session that went for almost 2 hours at that particular event. So here we're trying to compress a lot of that knowledge and information into a 1-hour session. So really, let's move from that objectives area to the agenda. So how are we going to consider or cover those objectives? The first item that we want to do is obviously talk a little bit about finding and adding some custom visuals for Power BI, so we'll understand how that part's going to work. We'll talk about how we can use the pages, queries, and web services for creating data sets. And we'll also talk about creating reports and dashboards with Power BI. Because a lot of this work that we do is going to be done in a tool called Power BI Desktop, let's lead with an introduction to Power BI Desktop and what that can do for you. A Power BI Desktop is basically just a tool that Microsoft's created for advanced editors or people who are creating reports and such in the Dynamics, from Dynamics NAV or from any other tool, to publish to PowerBI.com. Well, I don't have a slide on that, and I covered this in the preliminary session. If you want to think about the world of Power BI broken down into smaller subsets, here's how I'd want you to visualize or imagine this. If you are the person that's actually creating the underlying data models, or if you were using a more expensive product, if you had a pre-built data warehouse, the work that you would do to model data and to create the underlying relationships would be done with Power BI Desktop. That is the equivalent tool for doing that kind of work, or the appropriate tool rather. The people who actually need to access this information, and perhaps business analysts who need to take the data warehouse that you create or the relationships in the data models that you create, maybe create some last mile reports, some quick dashboards, or just simply consume those dashboards. Those people would go to PowerBI.com. That's a website. All of this data would then reside securely in the cloud, and you could access that using your Office 365 login, or if you don't have an Office 365 login, with your organizational or your work email and password that you can create with Microsoft. Then finally, because most of us are really mobile today and we're out and about, doing things from our home, from where we eat lunch, from where we meet our clients, it's really important then to have some way of accessing this data no matter where we are, and for it to be ubiquitous. And that is available through the mobile or the tablet app that you saw on one of my previous screens in the 3 screenshots. So free mobile or tablet app that you can download for use on your iOS, your Apple devices, or your Android or Google Play Store devices, or Microsoft tablets and phones. So all of those together are I think where you're going to go to for this type of information. All right, moving forward then, introduction to Power BI Desktop. So I want you to bookmark these URLs because they're going to become really important for you. I'm going to take you first to PowerBI.com's link to the Power BI Desktop. This particular tool can be downloaded and used on any Windows-based computer. So this does not have to be a server-grade machine. This could be basically a regular workstation. Now, you may find sometimes that it's more appropriate to just download it on your NAV server. So it's a free download, and once you download and you install it, you're going to be able to launch that and connect it to multiple data sources. So what I've done is I've already downloaded that. I'm also going to show you another tool today during our presentation, and that's called the Power BI Gateway. Gateway is, again, pretty important, because when we push our data out onto PowerBI.com the first time, remember that's where we consume all of this information. You'll see me go there a little bit as well. When we consume that information, what we find is we need a way or a mechanism to refresh that data from the source. And so there needs to be a conduit that PowerBI.com can use to grab data from your source, your database from Dynamics NAV. And that's the purpose served by the gateway. So we download and install that and then we basically configure the gateway to allow us to securely transport the data between Dynamics NAV and PowerBI.com. And the word securely becomes really important because when we're talking about your business sensitive data, we don't want this floating on the internet unsecured. Consider what happens when you connect to a source like your bank or your email provider. You want that data to be encrypted, and that's really done by using something called an SSL certificate, and usually those are issued by a TCA or a Trusted Certification Authority. That's a much longer conversation, but it's important that I want everybody to know that when you're talking about Power BI, it's not just about establishing a connection, but that we establish a secure connection and invest in a very paltry amount, it's about $69 to $99, and get an SSL certificate to encrypt the traffic between our NAV server and PowerBI.com. All right, so let's go ahead. I have a Power BI desktop instance already downloaded. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag and move a couple of things up on my screen here. Let's just escape the presentation for a second. We'll come back to it later. Now, when I first launched my Power BI desktop application, this is already installed on my computer. So when I look down over here, you'll see I have the Power BI desktop app. It will first ask me to authenticate myself and put in enter my sign-in. Now, I'd intentionally signed out before the beginning of the session because I want to walk you through this process. What type of credentials do you put in here? If you are an Office 365 subscriber, then you would use your Office 365 credentials. So I'm going to go ahead. It's going to bring up a screen. I have a dummy or a sample Office 365 account. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Okay, and it's taking me back to my other screen where I need to enter my password. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then bring this back up. So now that I've signed in, here is my Power BI application, or my Power BI desktop application. If you're using Mac or Linux device, you're not going to be able to use this tool there. So you'll either need to virtualize a Windows environment or go to a Windows server and run this. Everything else will run from your Mac OS, from any other type of operating system that you have. Now notice from time to time the system will provide updates. So now I'm being told that there's an update available. If I want to download that, I can click here and it will take me to the download page and I could do that. I'm not going to spend time downloading that. I just want to bring you to this page because you will see also what Microsoft has updated and what are the things that they are doing to improve the product. There's constant updates month by month, and Microsoft releases both new functionality within the Power BI desktop application as well as new visualizations and capabilities. So over here you will see Power BI desktop update, and we'll talk about all the things released in the month of May. So I strongly advise you to keep checking that and keep your Power BI desktop application up to date, and so you can benefit from the latest and greatest information out there in the marketplace. Let's explore this environment a little bit before we actually do some work, because it's important for us to understand all the things that we can do and we can manage. Now, right over here, you're going to see three different things on my taskbar on the left-hand side, or my navigation pane, if you will. This first view is called a report view. This is our whiteboard, and this will look a lot like an Excel spreadsheet with one or more pages. So this is my whiteboard where I can actually draw and do all the things that I want to create reports. At this point, I'm still not showing anything because there is no data to work with. The data that I use to create these reports is going to be found in the fields area. So as we go through the next parts of this presentation, we actually extract the data. What you're going to see is that data is going to be showing up as data sets and queries right over here. And what we would do is we would take that data and we would put them in, or use visualizations to represent that data on these sheets here, setting some filters or adding other formatting and so on. The next area is that when I do have some data that I've exposed, queries, tables, etc., I may be interested in seeing that in a tabular format to see what is this raw data available to me. And I could always click here and see that. And then finally, we're going to go to relationships. And when I work with some relationships, what you will see is I've got this little capability like I had in Microsoft Access and other tools to relate one table to another So if I have a table that shows customer balance information, like the customer ledger entry table in NAV, and the customer information, then I could say that the two tables relate thus and identify the field and then identify if it's a one-way or a two-way relationship. Now I am going to show you each of these in action as we progress through this particular presentation. Now the other thing is, as I do work and I complete things that I create, I want to save them into something called a PBIX file. So when I say file save as, it's going to give me these PBIX files that I can save this information into. Now this allows me to open this particular file again and then make more changes or updates before I re-upload that to PowerBI.com. Remember, our end goal is to get this information out into the cloud so that your company's users can access them from a tablet, a phone, or PowerBI.com. The way we do that is after we've created our data sets and we've modeled all the things that we need to turn around and publish this. So we publish it and it goes up into the cloud, and that is where people access it. You can, in theory, decide not to publish anything to the cloud, but if you do that, know that the only person who will benefit from these reports and queries and so on is going to be you, the designer, or the few people who download and work with PBIX files using Power BI Desktop. There will be no easy way for you to share this data across people. So you'll be very dependent on a local infrastructure where somebody has to download this application, somebody needs to open the file, or you need to share the file, which means you might have multiple copies of this floating around and so on and so forth. Also note that conspicuously absent from this is anything related to dashboards. Now, for those of you who attended earlier sessions of Power BI that I've done, you'll remember that a dashboard allows me to take multiple things that may exist on a report page. I might have a table, a graph, a chart, and lots of different things, and then select one or two key metrics from there and present them in one component. So that is really important that we have some key identifiers or key performance indicators for each report. So let's take a quick peek and let's see how that dashboard report and data set relationship comes about. I'm going to go to PowerBI.com here. I'm going to log in with my credentials. And Microsoft's constantly evolving the offering. Oops, didn't need to log in with that credential. I'm going to use this one. Fat-fingered that password. So let's try this again. So now that I'm in Power BI, I have some favorites. This is that PowerBI.com that people would use to access all of my reports and dashboards and things that I've created. Let's expand this navigation pane, and what you'll see is under the workspaces that I've created, I have various things. So I want you to look at the fact that I have all these data sets. So if I click on Microsoft Dynamics NAV, remember this is not the Power BI desktop app, this is PowerBI.com, where I've already published some work that I created here to PowerBI.com, and now I can see these data sets. So I have these little things like my sales dashboard data set or query, or one data set containing multiple queries, excuse me, that's a proper terminology, or sales opportunities and so on and so forth. And as I create this information from this particular set of queries, I can save them into reports, which I find right over here. So if I were to look at the various reports that are created, here are some examples. Right, to have a sales dashboard report, just because of my scaling, I think a few things are cutting off. There you go. This should look a little bit better. So now I can see all the different things I have here, filters, components, but I don't want to pin all of these things onto a dashboard. My dashboard probably needs to contain things from item sales, maybe from my top customer overview report, maybe from my sales opportunity report, and maybe some other things that I have, my search results, or some finance and product sales and all the other types of things. So I can take one or more components and then I pin them into these dashboards. So when I pin them into a dashboard, here you'll see all these different components from a variety of reports or from different pages on one report. And then as I look at any of this data, I can then click down and actually see more information about it. It takes me directly down to the related report where I browse and track information, and from there I can drill down and do more things. So the reason I went through this quick overview again or review again is that in Power BI Desktop, I do not have anything like a dashboard. I can create reports, but if I want to highlight one or two things from that report into a dashboard component, that's not available to me. Now, let's actually open a PBIX that I already have that I've worked with, and then later we're going to do a little bit more work. So I'm going to select this particular example of a visualization. Now, in so doing, this was a little bit of a report created around some visualization. And here I can see there are 2 queries associated. If I were to look at all the fields, I can see the import has some 3 fields called destination, source, and value, and there's some simple data. And if I want to see the actual contents, I could go down here to the data part. So I see this is what's contained in these different queries. And then finally, if I want to see if there's any relationship between the 2, I click on the model, and so it shows me whether or not any relationships exist by way of a line. Now, in this particular example, they're none. So this was my first and probably only thing that I'll show you that's not NAV related, and then as we go through, we're actually going to turn around and use more NAV specific examples of how we do work. But look at this visualization. This is a neat one. It's a little busy, I'll give you that, but what I like about the core type of presentation is sometimes we need to present data in a matrix format. So really what this is a matrix visualized. Because in a matrix, what you'll have is some information on an x-axis, but perhaps think about item sales, maybe by customer on one axis, on the other side by salesperson. So you want to see where the overlap of item sales is across those 2 categories, and this is really what it's presenting. So across categories like country and perhaps categories like quarters, it's taking this data and saying this is what we've made in a quarter, but if we were to break that by country, this is how much Q1 in US was, and this is how much Q1 in the UK was, and so on and so forth. So there's really some great value to this chart, and I find when you have to cross-compare data, this becomes very helpful. So let's go back into the PowerPoint presentation and look at the next thing that we have now that we understand the core Power BI desktop. Let's actually talk a little bit about Power BI visualizations. Oops, that's not what I was trying to load. Let's try this again. Shift and F5, yep. So custom visuals for Power BI, right? Now, as I said before, there are some visuals already in place in Power BI desktop. So all these visualizations that you see, like a stacked bar chart and some various variations of that, a pie chart, some tree maps, globe, table, matrix, filter capability, scorecarding, etc. But you may be interested in more things in the market that are available in the marketplace to present your data. You can always go and grab those from the Microsoft App Source. So today, you might find that both of these links direct you to very similar content, but one of these is becoming obsolete, so I bookmarked both. I just can't remember right off the top. You have this visual gallery store. This is no longer going to be available as of another 13 or 14 days, but everything that was available here will be moved over to the other link, which is the Microsoft Store or Office Store or App Source, as Microsoft is now looking at and calling it. So you'll find all these details over here. Same type of thing, your prerogative really on where you want to download something from. What I like about the visuals gallery is it gives you a little bit of information about what the visual does, obviously here in the main screen, but not only does it give you downloading capability for these visuals, but it also allows you to see a sample, because you may wonder, how do I actually put this to work? How would this work in my environment? What kind of data could I map? So if I were to take something like this pyramid 3D chart that somebody else has created, I could first download the visual. Okay. And this is going to be something I can easily import. So I come over here to this Power BI desktop and I say import a custom visual, import, and I'm going to import this file that I've just downloaded. It tells me that the visual is successfully imported into the report. So here I can now see this particular visual. But as I try to put data in, it may not make sense to me how this is going to work. So what I will do too is download the supporting sample. And so the sample is nothing but another PBIX file. So I'm going to click here and I'll open it, and it should basically pop up another instance of my Power BI desktop. So there's some tools when you create or you open multiple files, they're just different components within that particular application. Other times when you open multiple files from the same application, it opens up separate windows. Power BI is like the latter. It opens up things in separate windows for me. So I've got one complete separate instance or window of Power BI for this particular file and another one for here. So now I've got some sample data, I've got some charts and graphs and an example of how these visualizations work. So count of opportunity by sales stage. I want to see exactly what's being used here. So what I can do is look to the right in my fields area, and it shows me the queries in the fields that are being used from there. So as I look through this particular fact area, it's using the opportunity ID. And then from the sales stage query, it's using the sales stage field. And then if I'm curious about what these actually contain, again, I could always come back here and say, what is in the sales stage table? It'll show me that. If I want to see what's in the fact table or what's in the opportunity table, it will show me all that detail as well. So a very good way for us, and now notice over here in this example, actually, there's some meaningful relationships, how the product ID ties to the fact. And so if I were to look back over here and double click and open that, this is where we can see the relationships. We see that this field ties to this field, and it's a bidirectional relationship. And there, in the cardinality side, you might find that there's a many to one. So essentially, in this particular table, each one of these IDs may occur multiple times, whereas in the product table, there's going to be a uniqueness around each of these product IDs. You'll only see that one once. So with these types of tools and armed with this information, we can now go into Dynamics NAV and start pulling some data, and we'll talk about how we can go above and beyond what Microsoft has already created in its content pack. For those of you who need a reminder about the content pack and what it does, just a quick 30-second walkthrough is that when you are using PowerBI.com for the first time with Dynamics NAV, you want to see some examples of what your NAV data can show. You always just go to Get Data, say Services, and from here search for a content pack that Microsoft has created around NAV. Now I'm not going to say that it's simply fire and forget, but what Microsoft has done is they've created these types of dashboards that will show you all the data that you need, but you do need to first prime or prepare your NAV database to get this data out. So in my past session, I've shown a little bit. Later this year, as a matter of fact, I'll be doing a workshop through the NAV user group, and that's going to be a 3 or 4 hour session where we actually show people step by step everything you need to do with Dynamics NAV to be able to get data into PowerBI.com. This particular environment that I have is already set up so that most of the things that I need are done. I can simply select information from NAV and make that available. But in your environment, as you go about it, you're undoubtedly going to come across some issues, and that's what that step-by-step type of a workshop is going to help us accomplish. So stay tuned for that. I think we're planning to do that around the July timeline in 2017. So it's coming back over here. Let's talk about how we use pages, queries, and web services in Dynamics NAV to create data sets in Power BI. So our goal is that when I go back to my Power BI desktop environment, I want to see some of those queries, those fields, those data sets representing NAV data so I can turn and model all that data and use them into reports and dashboards. So the first place we want to start for that then is looking at NAV Web Services and developing a good understanding of what those web services do and how we can actually accomplish the task of creating additional web services when we need them. Because Microsoft has created some web services for sure, but I don't always want to just work with those existing web services. So later today I will also show you a little bit about how you go create more of those for your benefit. So first things first, let's actually bring my NAV server environment up on my screen here. So this is a Microsoft Azure environment that I use for a lot of my demonstrations. So let's go ahead, see if I can't make this minimized automatically hide taskbar. There you go. So it'll probably be a little bit better here. Now, as I'm working with this environment, I'm going to go to my Start menu and pull up my NAV development environment. It's going to come in handy. And I'm also going to fire up my regular NAV client. So Dynamics NAV. So I don't have much to do with the development environment just yet. I have to come to it, but it doesn't hurt to have that open. All right. So when I'm looking at Microsoft Dynamics NAV, I can navigate to my web services simply by typing in Web Services, and there are going to be other things here you can safely ignore. I'm not concerned about the PAC Web Services. I just need to go over here. So when I'm looking at these web services, I can see a few things that have already been set up. Your list will look different than mine. Depending on the version of NAV that you're using. If you're using 2009, you'll probably only see a column for SOAP URL. If you're using 2013 to 2016, you will see SOAP and OData URL. And if you're using 2017, or if you are going to be upgrading to a new version after 2017 when it comes out later this fall, you'll also see an OData v4 URL, which is JSON compliant, which looks a lot like basically everything you do with JSON. So our focus, though, today is going to be around OData URLs. And so what I want you to do, too, is look on the left-hand side and see how I have these different object types. Now, this is why I opened up the development database. When I work with Dynamics NAV, these are the types of objects available to me. All of my information resides in tables. The tables are what actually contain the data that I use. But because a table lacks any formal structure, it just is a flat table. It doesn't have anything in a card format or a list format with charts and graphs or fact boxes and so on. We then turn that information from tables into presentable data in pages. So my pages can contain some formulas that combine data from multiple tables, or have some calculated fields, or perhaps even just show a small selection of data in tables. So think of the fact that in the customer table I might have 150 fields or more. I don't want all of that to be seen by my users all the time. So a page showing customer card information will show probably a selected 15, 20 of those fields. And then if you're looking at a list of customers, you may want even fewer fields. So you'll create another list or of the customer or customers type of page, which will have even fewer fields, right? So customer list and then customer card. If I go through, just kind of do a quick design, you'll see that I have, all these different types of fields in my customer card. My customer list will be much, much shorter. For whatever reason, my Alt key doesn't work here in my presentation, so I'll have to go use the buttons. So this is all that type of information that's available. Now, there are reports. That's another data type, or that's another object type, excuse me. But reports are not significant for this conversation at all because I cannot expose anything from reports into or for using a web service. There's also code units and queries. Code units is where we just create a lot of stored procedures or functions if you're a developer in another application. So this is not going to have any presentation of data by itself, but this is what we use to manipulate or work with the data that exists in the tables. Queries, very much like SQL queries, we use this to combine data for different tables and sources, sometimes using SQL-style joins, other times just creating simple relationships. A lot of times the things that you do with queries is probably stuff that you can also do in Power BI desktop when you're modeling data and combining data from multiple tables. So what really happens is you need to think about best practices and see whether or not you are going to want to create a query in NAV to combine data from multiple tables, or if you're going to want to take all the raw data out and then mold it using data modeling in Power BI desktop. XML ports allows us to take data in and out. But the only things that you can use in web services are pages, code units, and queries. More appropriately, the only things that are relevant to us for our conversation for web services and Power BI are pages and queries. So a lot of times, even if you're not a NAV developer, you will benefit from knowing what pages exist in the development environment. So you could always come over here and you can look at this if you have access to the back end. You may even be able to create new pages, because if you're using NAV 2013 or newer and that's what you bought at, you get a lot of custom tables, pages, reports, etc. You get about 100 custom pages that you can use. If you're not a developer, work with your partner. If you're not an Interdyne BMI client, or if you are one of our clients, reach out to us. If you are doing, if you have a NAV development license and you want to take on some of this effort yourself, you can. It does not require a development license, but I always assume that if you have a dev license, you've probably got good, strong NAV development skills. But anyways, pages and queries are the only two things where we can extract data from for Power BI. So when we come back into, Dynamics NAV's web services, you'll see pages and queries. There are a couple of code units, but they don't have OData URLs and we don't utilize them. So if I want to take data from the item card or the item list or a vendor list or something like this into my Power BI desktop, how do I get that data? So I first start off by selecting this particular value, which is my OData URL, and I can copy this, and then when I'm in Power BI desktop, I would actually paste this value in there in the get data area. So you'll see me do that as an example too a little bit further in today's presentation when we're starting to get into that aspect. Now, let's move on to the next part. Sometimes you know where you want to get the data from, but you don't know what page ID it is. So maybe as you work with Dynamics NAV, what you realize is, I'm looking at this data from a customer's list. I just don't know what this page is called. And if you're not familiar, sometimes you'll find that the same type of information is presented in multiple pages in NAV. So you may have 2 or 3 different versions of sales order lists, or 2 or 3 different versions of the customer list or the vendors and so on. So it's important to understand or identify what page that is so that I can adequately call, or so I can easily call that from the Power BI desktop and from my web services. So when I come over here, notice here, for instance, this particular page references page ID or object ID 21. Everything in NAV really moves around this particular object ID reference. Object names are a user-friendly way of referencing something, but it's really easy if we know the object ID. So if I'm looking at any type of list in Dynamics NAV, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say go back to my home menu, and I'm looking perhaps at my sales orders page. And as I look at this list, I go, you know what, this is information that I need in Power BI to do some work. I need all these fields. So how do I know what exactly drives this data? So I come to this application menu here, and I click on Help, and I click on About this page. And when I do that, what the system will do is it will show me all the important things that I need. So the actual page ID is 9305. The name of the page is Sales Order List. Now, perhaps there might be more fields I want to add, or I wonder what table is feeding the data. Even though I can't directly talk to a table from Power BI or from web services, I might still benefit from knowing what the source table is so I can go and add more fields, or if this page misses a critical field that I know the table would have, I could use that for adding those. But we can take this information, 9305, and then we can use this in web services. So what we want to do then is, as we work with the NAV development environment, we want to use this to first identify or understand what type of data exists in this page. Let's do that, and then I'll show you the last part, which is creating and publishing a new web service. So just jumping back into Dynamics NAV again, I'm going to jump from where I was into the demo database here. And as I go here, I say 9305. So I have my object designer page, and if I don't see that right away, first make sure that it says something other than, let me see show you what happens if I'm not connected to any database. It would just say Microsoft Dynamics NAV Development Environment. If that's all it says, you won't see Object Designer as an available option because you're not connected to a database. So the first thing is you connect to your database, and when you do select and connect to it, the system will then show you the name of the database up here. So that's a good sign that I'm connected to something. It will also open up the Object Designer window. Should that not be available, I can go to Tools and Object Designer and bring that window up. All right, now that I'm in here, I can go to my page. I click in my ID column, and I can just start typing 9305, or of course I could scroll down. So this is that particular page I'm looking for. Now as I look down here, if I wanted to see what fields are available, maybe there are some fields that are available but are hidden by default. So I can look at all the fields that are available here. And if I need more information, I could just click on this, for instance, the bill to name, and I can look at the properties associated with it. It'll show me, is this visible by default? Look at this. It's not visible by default, so it's visible false. What this means is that when you're looking in Dynamics NAV here in the client, if I wanted to actually make this field bill to name available, I could right-click here and choose columns and bring that over. But I won't bill to customer name here. Let's make this larger. Bill to customer number, probably somewhere over here is also that name field, or bill to name. Might also not be an enabled field. I'll have to check back on it, but basically be able to come down over here. If this field is listed, but it's actually not made visible by default, then I could, toggle that value. The user can toggle that value to make that available on the page. Now, using this type of information, if I wanted to add more fields, I could. If I wanted to see what else is available on the table and just add a field, I would, hit F3 or right-click and say New Line. And then here I could also just select from the field menu the actual field or fields that I want to add. So I could scroll down here. This would show me the full exhaustive list of all the fields that were available on this table that I don't have on the particular, or that I may or may not have on the particular page. Then I could just select and add them here. Sorry, that's the extent of what I want to show you on the NAV development environment. Surely we're not trying to be developers here. Just general working understanding of what's going on is going to be pretty critical. Let's come back into our PowerPoint slide and then say, if I wanted to create a web service around the particular page that I just showed you, and maybe more, how do I go about doing that? So very simple. Creating a web service actually requires no development knowledge whatsoever. Back here in the user interface in that Windows client, or the role-tailored client as some of you may call it, I can go to the list of web services again. Okay, and as I go down over here, you will see that this is my existing list. I could say New, and then I select a page as my option. I can either do a lookup, and if I know my page's name, I can do a search. But if I actually know the page ID, it makes my life really easy. So I can type in 9305. And so here is that particular page ID. And I want to give it a unique service name. The service name is more important than the object name itself, because this is what I reference when I'm pulling data out from my system. Now, as I go over here, what you will find is I can give it any kind of name, but I prefer to avoid anything to do with special characters or spaces. So you can either put this as sales underscore orders or just sales orders. That's my suggestion to you. And the reason is, most applications are quite understanding of spaces, and you'll see the ones that Microsoft creates will probably occasionally have some spaces. But there are some applications that will not function well, or you will need to put in instead of typing in a space when you're using this service name, you may need to remember to use that HTML-friendly %20, %20 character, letters instead of the space itself. So instead of having to go through all of that, it's important that we just go ahead and do it this way. Once you do this, you publish this. Now, I can't stress this enough. What you are creating is company specific. All web services are company specific. The URL that I have over here, if you look at this closely, it is basically HTTPS. Let me see if I can copy this to my notepad. And apparently I didn't copy it. Well, let's try this again. There you go. So what you'll see over here is this is my server name. This is my OData port. This is the service name. This is the reference to OData, and then it also references the company ID. So, and this is what I was talking about. When you have spaces, sometimes it will replace the space with %20. If you have a comma, it will replace that with %2c, and so on and so forth. So this would be the URL that I would then use. Now, you'll see that I'm going to do something a little different here, and you may have to do the same. If your default instance of Dynamics NAV is not internet-facing, and you end up creating additional service tiers for Dynamics NAV to be able to function and to be able to expose that data out like I did over here with some of mine, I might need to use a unique, slightly different URL than my default one over here. So this is my default environment. It's a very long story about why I have something called unsecure. This topic for another day, but I have different services here. I need to figure out exactly which one I'm going to use to push that data out. So instead of using this particular URL, what I've done is I've actually created another shortcut in here. I'm going to go and probably, oops, try this. URLs.txt. So I've got this particular URL that I use instead. So I'm going to take this value. I'm going to replace everything preceding with this and just make this one slash. Now, the reason I had this is the elevator speech version of why I'm having to change this, is I'm using a self-signed certificate for Dynamics NAV, which means that yes, it secures and creates some encryption. However, Power BI does not know that this is indeed trustworthy because I self-generated it. If I were to create this from GoDaddy or VeriSign, that's a trusted authority, I would not have to jump through these hoops. So really, that's a trade-off. And what I'm doing here is okay for testing purposes because this is unsecure, but I wouldn't recommend doing this in a production environment because otherwise you'd be sending all your data without any secure encryption, and anybody with interested prying eyes could be able to get in. All right, so we're going to take this data, we're going to go back, minimize this for a second, and what we're going to do is we're going to put this into our Power BI desktop application. So let's just go ahead and say Power BI desktop new. In the meantime, I'm going to close some of the other windows that I have open. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come here and say in Power BI desktop, get data, OData feed, and in the field that's going to open up, I'm going to paste what I just copied. So everything down here, so all the way down to the sales orders. And I hit OK. Now at this point, it's going to ask me what type of credentials do I want to use. And this one's going to be really important. Keep this in mind. Always for NAV, you're going to have to select basic. It doesn't matter what type of credentialing method you use. The NAV to Power BI connection is created using basic because it transmits NAV credentials in a manner that is treated as a basic credential. So another thing you want to know is if you are using Windows-based credentials, you're probably going to have issues connecting to Power BI. It will work with other areas. The reason is your Windows credentials are going to contain a backslash. It will have a domain name backslash your username. And that causes a problem with the backslash is something that I think Power BI just does not like. So what I recommend, there are different credentialing types. I spent a little bit more time on this in my UG longer session, but use the NAV user password credentialing method. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you that in a second. But now that we have this and I need to go back in and I actually want to see what is my username, what is my password, let's go ahead and we can find that out really quickly. So back here in my demonstration environment, I'm going to go into NAV. I'm going to go to my user card. So users. My user ID, of course, is aja.admin, so I'm going to pull this open. Right? So this is my user admin, my user ID. I need to use this particular value, and this is a web service access key. If you do not have one, you can always come here and you can use the Assist Edit button or say Change Web Service Key, and it will give you the opportunity to change this. You can also make this something that expires periodically, or you can create it once and just it stays unchanged. But this is the password that it expects when I'm using the NAV user password credentialing method. So username and password, not your regular NAV password, the web service access key. So we're going to come back over here into my Power BI desktop application. I'm going to say aja.admin. I'm going to paste this particular value down here. Now sometimes as I paste and copy from remote desktop, I see that it might add an extra space or something like that. If it fails, I'm going to correct that. If it works, so it gave me a very interesting error. I do get this from time to time. The reason I get this error is because something that I have done before with this particular NAV database made it cache all the existing list of web services there. And now this particular web service is brand new and it doesn't understand that. So I can cancel. What I'm going to do is say options and settings. If I had some information open, I could refresh. Otherwise, I'll just go to my data sources. And I'll say global permissions, and I'm going to say clear all of these. Just go ahead and get rid of all the ones that exist because I'm probably having an issue due to one of these. So as I clear these out from my environment, I should have better luck. Otherwise, I'll open up one of my other connection files, and then I'll do that again clean. Now, as a result of what I've just done, I have lost the right URL for my web services. So let me just go back in here. Just cleaning up a couple of things on my other side of the desktop. I realize I'm probably going to benefit from having that taskbar showing at all times. So hiding the taskbar wasn't such a good idea. Let's try this again. Okay. So as I go back over here, I'm going to pull this URL that I had. Okay, back into my Power BI desktop. Okay, go back to basic, type in aja.admin and put in my password. Yeah, so let me see if I can't open up one of my other ones that's out there. Okay, so this might be pulling from one of my existing sources. So what I'm doing is I'm basically coming down over here, or hold on for a second. Also realize I'm running out of time, so I'm trying to be a little bit quick, but so here's what I'll do in the interest of time. I'll actually grab a data set that I've worked with before, but suffice it to know that when you actually get this, your best bet is to edit your queries and to do a refresh all using a PBIX file that is already connected to this particular environment, or you might need to basically clear all of your history and then start again. Does this happen a lot? Not really, because you'll most likely create all the things that you need up front before you start pulling data. But will this happen every once in a while? For sure it will. So, you know, I've had this happen on occasion. Today it happened, but in the interest of time, we're going to go back to our web services and pull one that I know I've used a few times already. So my customer list, my customer ledger entries, and so on. Let's go ahead and use this. NAV cust ledger entries, copy cell. We'll add this at the end. We'll try this again. So get data. Data feed. I also have my web services key copied here, so probably just copy and paste from here. Okay, so here it's showing me all the information that's already there in this particular table. As I then start looking at this, I may be interested in modeling my data. So that's really kind of our next stop with the Power BI presentation, which is how do we do some data modeling? How do we actually create some reports and dashboards and so on, right? So our goal is that as we take information, we're going to either treat this as financial reports or as sales or purchasing type of reports. So my first example is just some basic data modeling. Then I'll show you an example of some financial stuff and then other things as well. And I'm also looking at time. We're going to be a little pressed for it, so we might go over by maybe 2 or 5 minutes. So now that I have this information, the first thing I want to do is understand what these data types are. So I click on Edit. Okay. And as I look at this, the first thing it does is it says this is a query, and it calls it query 1. I'm going to change this so that I understand exactly what type of data this is, right? After all, we pull this particular data from the Dynamics NAV customer ledger entries page. So I want to call it something appropriate. So I'm going to call this customer ledger entries. Again, I avoid using anything that is a space or special characters. Now, while I'm here, this is a perfect opportunity for me to clear that issue that I had before. Once I'm using anything from this table, I could say refresh all, and at this point in the future, if I were to call that query, it wouldn't get that error. I also had something from that other sheet that I just inadvertently left behind. I could say not interested in keeping that around. Now that I'm working with the customer ledger entries, I want to create some data types and explain what these are. So right now, everything is treated as some kind of a string, ABC123, alphanumeric string. But I want the system to understand that this is a date. This is a document number, so fine, I'll leave this unchanged. let's talk about the next thing over. So as I scroll a little bit to the right, I might go to things that are numerical that need to be added, or maybe true false. So amounts, all of these amount fields, I want to make sure that the system understands that these are currency type of fields, right? So I'm going to select these various fields, right click and say change type, and I'm going to call this a fixed decimal field. Now later I can give some formatting and tell it that these are all going to be 2 decimal places or 3 decimal places or whatever the case may be. And then as I go down a little bit further, these are some more date related fields, and I could easily just transform this again into date. I wasn't trying to sort, excuse me. Okay. And then as I scroll down more, I'm going to skip a couple things that I don't care about. I could actually delete these fields. So I look at this and go, not really important to what I'm trying to do here with my report. So I can right click and delete these fields that I don't actually need. So remove columns. And then finally, as I have things that are true false, I can also select a Boolean option here. So true false, the system would know this way that this is a true false type of field, and so on. Now, one other thing that I want to point out to you is I might occasionally contain or have data that is geographic, right? So it might be information that points to a country, a city. In the customer ledger entries, there was no such information. But when I pull out my next record, which is going to be very much built around my customer, it's going to contain some of those types of information. So let's also just delete this particular page or this particular visualization. Now you see everything related to customer ledger entries on the right-hand side. I have amount, and as I look at this field, I might say, hey, what type of information is it here? It's just a summable field. This is what the sigma indicates. And maybe I want to make sure that it's 2 decimal points. So I do that, then it'll say this looks like an English United States currency way, and I could do these types of changes for everything else. Let's go back into the system. Let's add something for my customer table as well. So as I go through my customer, I know the service name is called customer, so I'm simply going to go back to this URL. Everything else preceding it is good enough. I just need the customer one. And I come back here and I say home, get data, OData feed. Now this time, depending on whether or not it saved my credentials, it may not ask. So at this point, it's asking me, but I'm pretty sure that by the 3rd time I do it, it stops asking me or prompting me for my credentials. So here again, I'll need my username and my web services access key. Okay. This again shows me all this data. I'm going to hit edit once more. So I'm going to edit this particular query. Now, as I look through this particular set of information, very similar type of steps. I'm going to go to customer, and if I have certain things that I want to be able to add, I can just, or say these are values, numerical values, whole numbers, whatever they are, I'd be able to add that detail. Okay, I'm going to make this true false, and I'll ignore everything else for now. This is also where you can get some dimensional information, both from customer ledger entries or in the customer table. What I want to do is show you 2 things. If I wanted to filter data, I could have done it when I was in NAV before I pulled this data out. I could have done it when I was editing the query a while ago, and I could have actually set some filters there back at the edit query level. So I could say over here, filter this particular list by, and I could set some filters that may be valuable. Or I can actually set the filters within the report itself, and this is really what I think you'll do more of, depending on the type of data you're working with. If it's financial data, you might not want to bring 10 years of data out from NAV, so you might filter that at the source. If it's a different type of report, what you might be interested in doing is creating that report and then filtering this over at the report or the page level. So I realize I'm at the top of the hour. I'd like to go for another 5 or 6 minutes. And I think for those of you who are not able to stay, we are recording this session. So you can always ask for a copy of the recording, and then we'll be able to benefit from what I show next. So my first goal is to take my customer information. I want to make sure that I understand cities, countries, and so on. So let's go down a little bit and say county. Select this field, go to modeling, and tell the system that this is actually a a county field, or I think in Dynamics NAV, this really just points to the state field. So this is where it's important to understand NAV relationships and NAV terminology. Our country region code points to our country region code. If you see city, city obviously points to our city. But if you see postal code, that's our zip code and so on. So as we take those basic things within the particular tables that we have in NAV, you should be able to now create maps. As a result of what I've done here, if I actually end up deciding to create a report on a map, it'll know exactly what type of data to pull and how to visualize that. Next thing I want to do is I have two different tables and I want to create relationships between them. So I go to my modeling area, and as I go to my modeling area, I tell the system that this is where these are the fields that link them, the two tables together. Now this is where you might need some help from us with more complex tables, but simple ones make sense. I can tell that my customer ledger entry table, which shows customer balances or outstanding customer things or so on, history of transactions, this value would relate to the number field on the customer table. So I just drag and I drop that here. Now when I double click this, it will show me some details. So by default, it's decided that this is a single directional filter, but it's not. It's actually a bi-directional thing. If I were to start from this table, I want to be able to drill down to this table or vice versa. So now this is the link to the two. There is a one-to-many because my customer table will have only customers appearing once, whereas the ledger entries might have multiple transactions for a customer. Quite simple here. I do that, then I come back to my report tab, and this is where I can actually start creating my report. So if I wanted to take some data, and if I wanted to create a sale, tracking sales by country region, so I can say country region, and then right over here by default it's assumed that I wanted a map. So no, I want this as a table, so we can select and show it. And then if I want to take some other fields here, I could say show me my remaining amount. So how much am I owed by each particular country that I've sold into, right? And then as I show this information, if I also want to see this particular data by another customer, by the customer name or the salesperson name, this is when it becomes really interesting to visualize the same information as a matrix. So I then select here, I can create a matrix type of table. And as I select my matrix, I could take different values and different details. So on the one side on my matrix, I might actually have my actual country region code. So we'll do the same thing we did before. I'm going to say this is going to be my rows. I might then have on the other side maybe my salesperson code, or maybe my salesperson name, depending on what it is that I like to see. All right, and then as I do this, I might want to show the value from the customer ledger entry table, and so I could come down over here from the query and I'd say show me my remaining amount. So now this takes that same type of visualization that I had before, shows me the same net total, but breaks this down in a manner that actually helps me. And that's where that other visualization I showed you comes in handy as well. So you can create all the things that you need to. And what I want you to remember is when you want to set filters, here are the ways you have to filter this data out. One way is you can actually give a user the ability to filter this information by clicking into the filter pane and then adding this particular value as a filter, or maybe just selecting particular other type of value. So as I select this list and I click here, notice everything else will that doesn't match these tables and these values will shrink. There may be other times when I actually only want to filter, I want to pre-filter things so that the users don't have to remember to do that, or I want to lock people into a certain thing. And I could do that by coming down to say customer, and I could say really show me this report only for customers who have a certain customer posting group. So I'm going to take my customer posting group and put this at a page level filter. Now if you think from an Excel perspective, page or a tab is probably what I want you to think. So my report is one page. I have page 1, page 2. These are other pages. So this particular filter I've created at this point, where I'll say only show me these things for EU sales, this is going to apply for any visualization that's on this page. Page 1 and page 2 could have completely different page filters. Or I could have taken the same filter and said this applies to everything at the report level. So if I were to do that, now this particular thing would apply for all different pages that I have here. It's the same concept. I just set this filter. Now There are some implications. You might want to challenge yourself and play with this and see what works best. So this is how you can create and you model the data that you need. I am going to then save this. I'm going to call this my webinar PBIX. And the last thing that I'm going to do after I'm done here is I'm going to publish this. I'm doing it so you can kind of see this in action, and then we'll start wrapping up. I suspected that I would not be able to complete everything around financials and so on, so I actually have a nice takeaway for those of you interested. In my PowerPoint slide deck, there's an embedded, there's another embedded PowerPoint in there that you can actually use for some hints. So back here anyway, it's published in PowerBI.com. I see this webinar PBIX, this data set that I've created. I also see that I have my report that I created, which is the two things that I put up here. Then if I wanted to promote one of these, I could select on one of these visualizations. Each one of these is called a visualization. I say pin, and then I could pin this to my existing NAV dashboard. Now, there are entire sessions that are done about dashboarding. If you are interested in learning more, I invite you to reach out to me or to somebody on our team to help you with additional dashboarding. There are also local user groups that are forming all over the country for Power BI. Those are usually led and managed by Microsoft, where you might be able to interface with your peers and learn some more as well. So this is my dashboard, and as I click on it, it takes me down to the report. For financials and so on, here is that embedded resources talking about. So when you get this, double-click this. This is an entire PowerPoint slide deck from something I did for the NAV Summit conference last year, which shows best practices in working with KPIs for account schedules and so on. And then for sales, I've shown you a little bit of an example already. So just as a recap of our session, really Power BI Desktop is going to allow you to model and create custom data sets from NAV to use in reports. Lots of different visualization options available. You can format things. We didn't spend any time on formatting and dashboarding today. Web services is really where you're going to focus your efforts to draw the pages and things that you need. Microsoft is adding more functionality to web services. You'll see this when you use NAV 2017. There are some create your own web services using a wizard tool. We can create queries in NAV, but I probably would suggest that you bring more data out and then tie them together, unless you're a NAV super user. There's value to queries, but if you're not strong on the NAV development side, that might be a little more trouble at the beginning. And then finally, read that or take a look at that embedded PowerPoint presentation that I talked about that's on the previous slide to learn more about using financial data. For any questions that you have, feel free to email me at aj.ansari@interdynebmi.com. It's a pretty long one. You can also email marketing@interdynebmi.com. Our Twitter handles are up here. We have a Let's Talk NAV.com tips and tricks blog where we frequently post helpful things about Power BI and everything else related to NAV. Or you can visit us at interdynebmi.com as well. I thank you for your time. I'm sorry that I went a few minutes over. Look forward to seeing you on a future presentation, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.